Very positive news for all of us across the world that's coming in from the United States. No, this is not about the elections. This is about the COVID-19 vaccine. In fact, this is coming in on a huge development on what has been announced here by Pfizer. The US pharmaceutical giant has revealed that COVID-19 vaccine in phase 3 trial has shown 90% efficacy. And that's announcing a huge number, to be announcing a 90% efficient rate there for phase 3. The US company and the German biotech firm, which is the BioNTech, has said that the coronavirus vaccine was effective in preventing COVID-19 amongst those who are without evidence of any prior infection. Now, this vaccine is among the 10 possible vaccine candidates in the late-stage testing around the world. 4 of them so far in huge studies in the United States. We have Times Network's Pankaj Podar getting us further details here.
Well, let's talk about one of the significant developments that happens as far as COVID-19 vaccine is concerned. Pfizer-BioNTech, which was doing a development or was in the phase 3 of their development, has released some preliminary data or interim data, as they are calling it, of the phase 3 trial, which is showing that more than 90% it seems to be effective in providing a vaccine for COVID-19. Now, they were doing a test on 43,000 people. This, of course, is an interim data that they have shared, or interim words that they have come in from the study so far. They expect the study to complete towards November end, and maybe it takes some time for them to collate further data. So maybe by December first week or second week, you should go ahead and see further data coming in on this front. But in the midst of it, it seems to be a positive data. It seems to be a data after a while, which is showing that this vaccine probably can go ahead and fight with COVID-19. It's a 2-dosage name that we're talking about, or a two-shot dosage for 28 days, and then it probably gives you the vaccine. So that's or the antibodies that essentially would be needed. Comes in definitely as a positive surprise. More data needs to be tracked, but at this point of time, it's an interim data. It comes in as a positive data. The Pfizer CEO has gone ahead on record and said that this data seems to be better than what they were earlier anticipating, and that's why markets have taken a sigh of relief as far as this vaccine development is concerned.
Let's get in more expert voices here. We have this evening with us Professor Sudhir Krishna, who's with the National Center for Biological Sciences. We also have Dr. Ramanan Laxminarayan. He's the affiliate professor for the Global Health at the University of Washington and Director and Senior Fellow at the Center for Disease Dynamics, Economics and Policy. First to you, Professor Krishna here, your first reaction on what has just been announced. We have seen worldwide some of the vaccines which are in phase 3, but to announce a 90% efficacy is actually huge.
I got a forward on a WhatsApp group about 20 minutes ago, so that's about the information that I have. But let me run through what I can guess from the limited information that I have. So typically RNA vaccines, they've not yet, nucleic acid vaccines have not become mainstream per se, but there's no reason why they should not become mainstream per se. RNA vaccines per se would be safe. There's no issue with them. When you say efficacy, there are 2 kinds of efficacy, right? There's immunological parameters and there's actual prevention of infection. So the first one is probably fairly straightforward. They must be getting good immunological responses, both T cell and B cells, antibodies. I don't have information about what is their efficacy trial. I'm assuming that they have a placebo control and there's a sort of random infection kind of group that they're monitoring in areas where there's probably a high percentage of infection. So just going by what I've heard, I assume that it's okay. Remember that RNA vaccines are going to be a challenge in the cold chain manufacturing. So probably in the urban centers in India, this would work very well. I'm not exactly sure how an RNA vaccine would work in a rural transmission delivery system. The Chinese, from a paper that I remember about a few months ago, actually had an mRNA COVID vaccine, which was sort of temperature stable. And Raghavan Varadarajan's group in IISc, not working on an RNA vaccine, but have been working on sort of temperature stability. So there might be ways around it, but that's about as much as I can tell you at the first pass. And then maybe if there's other questions or the other panelists have something to say, we can go further.
Dr. Laxminarayan, please respond to that. Your first reaction to a brand which is saying that this has now met with 90% efficacy. We know that the Oxford vaccine has also been in its phase 3 of trial. Australia has already started manufacturing it despite the final results not being out on that front. But is this just a clickbait 90% efficacy, or does this really mean something formidable on ground? Something far more promising that we've not heard before?
I would be cautiously optimistic. This is a phase 3 trial, so they probably looked at both immunological outcomes, but they also probably looked at clinical outcomes. The press release says that there were 94 cases of infection and a 90% efficacy rate, which would indicate that they probably had a lot of people who didn't get infected, who received the vaccine, and that's really the basis for this press release. It's highly unusual for a company to put out a press release on, they probably are doing a 30 or 40,000 person trial, to do this after just 94 infections. But Pfizer is a large and established company. The comparison is that the other company that is in the news for making an mRNA vaccine is Moderna. And there are some significant differences here. The Moderna vaccine has to be stored at about minus 20 degrees. And this one, as Professor Krishna said, is about minus 70 degrees. So the utility of this vaccine for India is quite questionable, just because we certainly don't have the cold chain to support something like that outside of big hospitals and urban areas. But that doesn't mean that the vaccine is useless. It just means that it can only cover some people who are within the reach of such a cold chain. Now, the mRNA vaccine is also a lab-produced vaccine, so one of the advantages is that it can be scaled up very quickly. And in fact, that's the reason why there's been so much hope about this specific technology. And although there has been no vaccine to date made from mRNA, we've got to remember that this will be the first major vaccine made this way. I'm cautiously optimistic.
All right. Professor Krishna, talking about now ground realities, Dr. Laxminarayan and you both having touched upon as far as how this is going to work for India, storage capacity, cold chain issues here. But can we also touch upon the timeline? If Pfizer is saying that there is 90% efficacy here and it is already the last and final phase 3, how many more months or weeks are we looking at? Are we really hitting at a vaccine that could work by the end of this year, not even wait for January 2021 then?
So I've been on your program quite a few times, and in general, I've been, to borrow a word from the other panelists, very cautious in my assessments in general. But my sense is that if you have a vaccine now which is ready to go, I've been very impressed with what I've heard about Serum Institute and others in terms of scaling their manufacturing capability. I don't personally have any experience with manufacturing, but the numbers that I've been hearing about Serum Institute and Pfizer-BioNTech and others have been very impressive. So my guess would be that one should be able to scale fairly rapidly. The Indian pharma industry in general and the vaccine industry in general is one of the better industries. With the caveat that you're going to be able to get it across to urban areas and people who can store them at minus 70 and so on. My guess would be that you can be more than a little bit cautiously optimistic, but caution is always called for.
All right. I was essentially looking at if this clears the timeline further to the availability. Dr. Laxminarayan, if you could add further to that here. Is there a clearer picture? Because this is the biggest question bearing on people's mind. Efficacy and working of the vaccine, of course, would be a given once a company announces it. But the larger concern is the availability. To what effect is this coming in as good news before wrapping up 2020?
So it's unlikely that this will even come close to being in patients, even in the West, till probably the second quarter of 2021, forget about at scale. So you have to remember there's lots of steps still. We have a glimpse into efficacy, We don't know the duration of efficacy. Efficacy might last for 2 months. Maybe it lasts for 2 years. We don't know that. If it's 2 months, then it's not worth, getting the vaccine out there. The third thing is that the vaccine has to actually be injected. This is not a vaccine that we can give. This is not like an oral polio vaccine. This is a vaccine that actually requires someone with nurse training to actually deploy. So there are many challenges with an mRNA vaccine. And while it's good news for sure, it is not necessarily the vaccine that is best suited for India for scale up. And then availability also depends on price. The likelihood is that this vaccine will be priced out of the reach of most people in India just on the basis of the discussions of what the US is willing to pay for it. So you have to remember, in the long line of people waiting for this vaccine, it's all going to come down to what people can pay. And regardless of the Gavi and the COVAX facilities, for a country the size of India, we're not going to be able to get much vaccine in here except for maybe some core populations, maybe doctors, frontline health workers will be able to get this vaccine at an earlier stage through that COVAX facility. We can expect that, the middle of 2021. But I think realistically for India, a large-scale immunization with the COVID vaccine, you're looking at, 2022. And I know that sounds really far away, but it's a reality of it. That's actually, I would consider that a very good scenario. If we got everyone vaccinated by the end of 2022, I would be very happy.
Can I come in?
All right. We appreciate you giving out more clarity. Yes, Professor Krishna, final remarks, if you may, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I agree with the panelists, but I'd like to add a few caveats to that. I think historically in this country, we've always thought about vaccine optimization in terms that it should be cheap, it should be manufactured easily, it should be easily distributed. You're now in a situation where you need some quick answers. And if this is going to even target a few groups, as the other panelists said, if it can in general, get some herd immunity going in the system, I would back it. So I would not wait. I mean, in reality, India is not one country. We are many countries in some ways. We have different purchasing powers. We have different reaches and so on. So I would actually just go ahead and do it, even if it's not the perfect solution. I understand that there is always a desire for a perfect solution. But if we can get some herd immunity going, if we can protect our health workers, there's a system optimization which starts getting into play. And it will sort of get in a lot of other people thinking about the system, increase competition, bring down costs. So I would not be necessarily looking for the perfect solution in this situation. So long as it's safe, I would recommend that we go ahead.
All right. So absolutely. As Dr. Laxminarayan also said, as a priority to get our COVID warriors vaccinated first, and then, of course, to the rest of the population. Professor Krishna, Dr. Laxminarayan, appreciate you speaking with us on this very significant breaking input on the COVID-19 vaccine here that has come in.